creative self is like this organism that you need to cultivate. And that energy is real genuine. Can't fake it.
Hey everybody, welcome to Rightbrainers, where we unpack the latest trends in technology and creativity through real stories of creative breakthroughs brought to you by Z by HP. In each episode, we'll dive inside the creative minds of the world's most innovative thinkers. I'm your host, Tito Hamze, a man on a mission to get his left brain to understand some of the biggest right brains out there. I'd love to give a warm welcome to designer / director / artist / vegan / galactic crusader, Bradley G. Munkowitz, better known as GMUNK. He's changing the way we think about everything from fluid simulations to creative collaboration, one mind-blowing work of art at a time. Welcome to the show, GMUNK.
Thank you, Tito. Good to be here.
Multi-disciplines. Designing, directing, experimental, the technology, the cool stuff, the creative things, the list goes on. How is life?
How's life? Life's good, man. I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about the state of the world like everyone else, but always keep busy. You know, if things slow down, I go into learning new techniques, new research. I've been learning a lot of things about fluid simulations, simulating water and fire and smoke.
So is that like, is that very rudimentary, basic stuff you're working on there? Is that complex stuff? And then you're testing for future things? Like, how's that all working? Because fluid simulations, it looks intense.
Everything is correlated, right? Everything has a symbiotic relationship. Every piece of art form that I do is all codependent on each other. So if I was on set and we were doing a phantom shoot with rain grids, waterfalls, and dancers, right? And I was watching it. And I was really into how you could refract through water and how water would displace on forms. And so it's like, I need to learn how to do this in 3D so I have more control. So I don't need, 30 people on set to make this kind of stuff, right? So that's what I've been teaching myself is how to simulate nature, how to simulate elements in the computer.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing.
Billions of particles going.
You went to Humboldt, from what I understand.
Humboldt State, baby.
Now you're doing these fluid simulations, but I want the people to know a little bit about you. But there's tons of information and content out there, and you're all about like learning and figuring out stuff. So I was wondering, could you give us just like a very brief of like key learnings from then until now that have brought you to where you are?
One of the key learnings in college was to live gently. Right? Right when I arrived at Humboldt, I lived with 8 vegans. Right? I was a kid from Minneapolis, born and raised. My whole family moved to San Francisco and I went to college in Humboldt. And immediately moved in with 8 vegans. Yeah. Each vegan was a vegan for a different reason. There was the athlete, there was the animal rights activist, there was the environmental activist, there was like the hippie shaman, it was like there was the punk rock straight edge. Everyone had a different reason. And so I just got beaten right away to just live gently and gracefully. And I adopted that for 22 years. I was vegan. I'm still mostly vegan. I cheat with if I go to a really expensive restaurant with my wife, I'll have a piece of cheese pizza, when in Rome. But I think developing those healthy habits early, when I was young was really pivotal in everything I do because I believe in energy. I believe that creativity is an energy that you bring to your work. And also just being kind of just a chill, easy to work with, cool kind of dude. And that opens up collaboration opportunities because people want to work with you when you're easy to work with and chill and fun and graceful and you really understand when things aren't meant for you, that you let those things go.
What's an example of that? Of you taking that and then getting into a collaboration with someone?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of the reason that I am so multidisciplinary is because all of my closest friends work in these industries, right? And we're just a bunch of kids that like to play with toys, right? And we channel our childhood into the enthusiasm we bring to these different mediums. Robotics, live action, photography, all of my different projection, any sort of light form, sculpture, anything, music, editing, narrative. I have friends, really, really dear friends for 15 years that all work in these industries. We collaborate all the time. And that I could never do this kind of stuff on my own. I would never be able to learn all of it. But when you work with people you love and people you adore, then it's so much easier to learn. It's so much more fun to learn, and you make things together. I grew up making films, making stop motion films and, VHS recorders, running around making little, horror films in college, 16 millimeter films. And it's just, played Dungeons and Dragons growing up, would take the little figurines and paint them with my older brother, create characters. We all became gods. We'd cheat in the game. We had all our characters were gods in the end. We'd just wipe out everyone with 400 hit points and just crush it. It's just something that I've always lived by, is just live really gracefully and to be chill. It's just to understand, like, when things aren't meant for you, there's really no possessiveness or control in the world of creativity. In my mind, I love to share. I love to be open. And I think all of those things, all of those kind of mantras kind of build you as a creative. I think one of my heroes is Spike Jonze. And Spike Jonze is one of those guys that grew up skateboarding, filmed all the Jackass films, would film the Beastie Boys, was really into like all the cool kind of shit, but super hands-on as a filmmaker. And, has gone on to be a huge feature film director, but his crew still exists. Like, all the people that he came up with are still his closest collaborators. He's got a family, right?
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I got a family of friends. And to really understand crediting too, like to really credit your friends, seek to elevate your people. It's not a one-man show. It never is a one-man show. And I think that's super important. I think just that whole sphere of belief system, I think, has really formed the creative I am.
And like having that group of people and having the creative collaboration and the laid back attitude and being able to work on projects at the speed and the breadth that you're working at, when you're coming up with an idea, right? How do you take it on from a client brief? Do you have the idea? Do you mold it to the client brief? What is your process from idea to completion?
I think it really depends on what we're doing, right? If it is an agency commercial job through an agency, then I do react to the brief. I react to their brief. And I understand with agency work that it's not necessarily mine. Right. I'm hired to help them service a client. And so I really actually respect their brief quite a bit, and always tried to add a few new takes on everything and some really cool execution to it. But I respect the foundation of the work that they have done because they've sold it through to the client.
How often do you work on your own passion projects? Like, I mean, and I imagine every project that I've seen you do, I'm like, holy moly, this is so clean. Holy, what the heck? How is this done? Oh my God, this is amazing. But then I see a little piece like Monkey King, and I'm like, oh, that looks fun. That looks like they were just having a good time. And your behind the scenes video on that one, it had a different vibe than the other behind the scenes videos that I watched previously. So like, how do you split your time up between passion projects and work? And then how do you pick what you want to work on yourself?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. I think the key to that is time management. Okay. And you may be listening to me and you might be like, oh, this guy's, just kind of this flighty, hippie little dude that's just kind of waving his arms around and has like really no idea what's going on. And, or like no structure to his day. It's actually just the opposite. My time is a design in itself.
Yeah.
Where I structure my day, I color code it. I color code my whole life on my calendar, right? Yeah. Everything's color coded. And one thing that is always happening on my calendar is personal projects. Always. So every day I'm working on a personal project because I have, and so I'll schedule them out. For 3 weeks, I'm working on this. For 3 weeks, I'm working on this, I'm doing this research. So in amongst the client projects are always the personal, and they're color coded. So the personal projects are blue and gold, blue and gold kind of, and I can isolate them on my calendar. So I can isolate them. My client projects are all gray, in studios, green, and then social and recreations, purple and red, so it's like, so it's everything is. So I've trained, done this for years, and I trained myself to look at the day, and I'm like, okay, boom, boom, boom. We have this, we have this, we have the recreation, as a workout, or going to the park with my dog is recreation, hanging out with friends. So, whatever. And, but there's always blue and gold in there. Always.
Yeah. There has to be, or else you go crazy.
You go crazy. But I mean, I think to that point though, I think you should treat your client projects like personal projects, like personal work, because the thing that you should propose things to clients that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if they don't, and if it doesn't award or they don't accept it, that's okay. It's okay. Move on to the next one, pitch it again, pitch it again. So a lot of my client projects feed into my personal projects either as research or just like a straight up execution on something I want to do. Yeah. Right. So for instance, we made a film called Orbis Integra. It's all about cymatics. I'm going to now apply those learnings, that research to a client project. And then those learnings from a client project I'll apply to a personal project, and it's just, it's never ends. It's that snowball.
Circle of life.
The circle of life, baby. Yeah. I think it's important though, to just to have fun with your client projects. And I think also, when you're working with agencies and clients, be authentic. You don't have to, I'm wearing a nice shirt here because I want to doll this up a little bit, but I got these cool shirts, but I'm never going to not be myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With a client, I'm not going to put on some official, facade of, it's always myself.
They see through that too. They totally do.
Well, and I think it's just it goes back to the vibe thing. It's like, I'm very easy to work with because I understand that, not all things have to work, and there's discoveries along the way. And another thing that I'm really, really honest with myself about is failures. I shot a film early this year for a title sequence, and there were so many things I could have done better, and there's reasons for why they weren't done better. And so I write those things down, and I've had 2 shoots since, and I just, was all over that. Never make that same mistake twice. If I didn't have it this time, I have it this time. And I just would never make that same mistake twice. And I think you just have to be really honest with yourself. And as long as you learn from those and don't do it again, or just, really, really apply yourself to fix everything, you'll constantly get better.
Learn from those failures.
Yeah, learn. And
that's what's
just
important.
Get better, just keep on getting better.
So off of that, because people want to know real hands-on stuff that they can go and try themselves, what software are you using to do all this type of stuff?
So I use Maya. I've been using Maya since the beginning of time. Mm-hmm. And I've just always liked it. And there's a plugin for Maya called Bifrost, and that is their ocean and fluid simulation. And they also have one called Aero, which is for smoke. And then I kind of always go back to my graphic days where it's like, okay, I'm making these fluid sims, and now I want to make them particles. Yep. So now there's 60 million particles that I'm rendering, and it looks kind of like something out of a sci-fi film. But there's also other software like Cinema 4D has a fluid generator. Houdini is probably the best thing to use. That's what visual effects companies use to make giant explosions and such.
And learning these, are you self-taught or are you taking classes? How are you learning about
self-taught? Yeah.
Whoa.
YouTube, man. You can really learn anything on YouTube these days.
Yeah.
There's so many videos for it. Yeah.
Was there a big learning curve?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. But I've spent, 20 years doing this. So I'm used to kind of the logic of software.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It all has kind of the same logic and the same kind of interface structure. I used to design interfaces myself as well. So I understand kind of how this all works. But I would say, for people getting into motion design and 3D animation, I think Cinema 4D is probably the most approachable, and they're getting great render engines. They've partnered with Redshift, and there's amazing render engines for Cinema Octane as well using the GPU. Maya is kind of a different level, but I just always have used it. Houdini. I think those are the 3 kind of best ones to learn for what I'm doing.
Yeah, I remember I opened Maya once and I was like, I'm completely overwhelmed. And then
Yeah, it looks like a rocket ship. It looks like you're in a space shuttle or something.
I want to know, what was the turning point that pushed you into 3D?
I have a background in design.
Mhm.
And I started off in interactive design doing Flash. Flash is an old school, web animation program from the early 2000s that everyone used to make Flash websites and stuff. Then I went into motion design. In that course of events, those mediums, 3D is a huge part of it. And for me, I never wanted to get into the like really hardcore hands-on 3D animation. It just wasn't my thing. I was more of a kind of a pretty designer rather than like wanting to rig a man's arm for 3 days, doing bones and skinning and stuff. It just wasn't interesting to me. I was much more into like the design of everything, right? So 3D to me was always a tool to make design. And so I would always use 3D to create like flat shaded renders, meaning it doesn't really have, materials to it. I use 3D to make graphic design, if you will. And from there, I would always kind of think to myself, how do I want to use 3D? I want to use 3D to, do these kind of psychedelic fisheye distortions. I'm really into lens distortions.
Yeah.
I'm really into optics and kind of filtering optics and lens distortions. So I found a way in 3D to have a fisheye lens and to put a fisheye lens inside a shape full of points in a fisheye lens is cool because everything distorts around the camera. That was a really fun way for me to make these portals, these kind of graphic portals in 3D that when someone looks at that, they're like, oh my God, how did you make that in Illustrator that would have taken you 10 days? It's like, no, actually, it didn't. It took me. It's just like being clever about how you use things in 3D can get you really far in graphic design. But actually 3D animation and stuff, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to lay down 500 keyframes. It doesn't inspire me. So instead I say, okay, to get animation, I want to manipulate natural substances and fluids and water and different, natural elements with the animation built in where I just tell it, where does it go? What does it collide with?
Yeah.
How does it spin? What are the fields applied to it? And it animates itself.
AI is like a huge thing now. And how do you see that like playing into your work, artificial intelligence and that type of stuff?
I don't think AI will ever replace a creative. I think it's more of something that is you feed it and you teach it to learn and it gives you results. And a lot of people are using it to style transfer, for instance, where you put in a bunch of styles and you watch it kind of learn from these styles and create something unexpected. And it's beautiful. The way it transitions from one to the other and just how it moves is really cool. I think it's slightly overused because right now it's kind of doing the same thing for a lot of art being made. And for me, I'm not getting into it.
What do you mean by that? It's doing a lot of things that a lot of art's being.
It's kind of like it returns the same kind of aesthetic every time. A lot of people are using it to manipulate landscapes. Yeah. Right, where you see landscapes morphing from one to the other. You feed a lot of things. When I was living in London for a while, and I was working out of the Field studio. Field's an awesome design studio. One of my dear friends, Marcus and Vera are the founders, and they were doing a lot of stuff where they had my wife, who's a painter, paint all these beautiful textured acrylic washes, and then they fed it into the AI. And had the AI interpret her paintings to apply to photographs. So her paintings were then assembling these landscapes, and the landscapes had all these cool gradients and washes and texture to it. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But a lot of people are doing that kind of thing where they input a set of images to have it make a landscape or a city, and it's kind of the same. It kind of animates the same way. And I haven't fully embraced it just yet. But I'm really, really inspired by systems. And what I mean by systems is DoorDash was a system. We fed it all these photographs and we said, okay, here is your grid. You could populate the grid any way you want. No 2 seconds are the same or would ever be the same because there's all these random seeds on where it could go with all these permutations. It's an infinite system. You could call it AI, but it's a system that we designed. It's not a system that we just let, kind of propagate on its own. I mean, it kind of propagates on its own, but it's a controlled system, I guess, right? And I think that at some point, as it gets more sophisticated, I think we will let AI do more. And it's inspiring because it's a different interpretation of what you're giving it. It's like a different voice to your work, which is cool. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So I think it's early days.
Yeah. So how do you keep disciplined with so many like things that are part of your experiments, your experiences, these productions? Like, are you focused on one part, or are you dabbling in every little thing and trying to master it all?
I kind of the latter. I think that
You're
that
neurotic.
you can never.
You like want it all to be done
Yeah.
and perfect.
Well, I think that you delegate to your crew, right?
Yeah.
You delegate to your people, and there's things that when you're exposed to something, and you have this curiosity, and you're exposed to things, you pick it up.
Yep.
By exposure, you learn. But there are masters of these things where I could never really want to go as deep as they do. But these are all people that I love and adore that I work with, and they're the masters. And I just kind of, as a director or as an artist, you kind of steer the ship, and you want people to have their voice, to have their input, to have their roles in everything. And you just kind of balance it all. And I think the vibe comes from the top. The vibe comes from the top. When people know when they work with you that they're going to have a voice and they have a role, their role is more important. With that, their work becomes better. I worked on a feature film called Tron Legacy. I designed all the holograms in the film.
Yeah.
And me and a crew of 5 of my homies. And what I learned from that was watching the director, Joseph Kosinski. Same kind of vibe. He trusted us so much with everything. He would just trust us and just let us run with things and just give us the space. And it always felt like such a nice creative process, and just the kind of the long leash he gave us.
Yeah, there was no micromanaging.
Yeah, no. And it was, and his producers understood that. Everybody understood that. And it was just from there, I always said, you know what, if I ever get into directing, back then I was much more into motion design than directing. And I said, if I'm ever going to get into directing, I want to be just like Joe. I want that vibe. He's very prepared. He's very calm. He's very methodical, and left such an indelible imprint on me. He's such a G, man, such a cool dude, but in this like really methodical, graceful way. And I've always, sought to emulate his kind of intelligence and his vibe and what he brings to things, and how he enables his collaborators.
And do you feel that feeling is achieved through or enhanced by collaboration and learning from others?
Yeah, and learning on my own. It's just that feeling of that spark. Creativity is a spark. That's an aha moment. How many times have we been in the shower? Shower for me, it's always the shower. And you're like, something, it's a spark in your head. You're like, oh, wait a minute. That's it. And that spark, that feeling, that little rush of adrenaline for me is everything.
Yeah.
Is everything. And I constantly am trying to throw down as many sparks as I can in my kind of the continuum of my creative life, because that's the feeling I want.
Yeah.
And so learning fluid sims is the same thing. You learn one thing and you're like, okay, wait a minute, I can apply this to this to this, and this could become this, and this could become this. And it's just fun. It's just fun. And, I think the key is just to remain curious, and to know that like 80% of what you do, 60% of what you do shouldn't be shown. It doesn't, but then everyone nowadays is so into process. Like I'm into like sometimes when you see the finished product of something, right? You're like, okay, that was dope. But then you see the behind the scenes and you're like,
holy, yeah, exactly.
And so the journey sometimes is more important than the destination.
What do you have your eye on for any new techniques or any new mediums that you're exploring in the future?
As I get older, I feel more. I'm finding that I feel more. I feel more strongly as I get older.
Cry easier in movies?
Yeah, cry easier. I just feel moments more, and I'm more into moments and narrative and storytelling. And so for me, the dream is to create experiences. that people go through, experiences that they go through in a real environment. But that's kind of the dream, is to create shows or experiences that you can go through, and each environment, full environmental takeover.
Holy moly.
You hear and you feel the resonance, and you see, and everything around you is design and animation, and it's immersive, and it has a narrative thread through it. That's something that really inspires me.
Yeah.
That enthusiasm is energy. It's energy that you have to bring physically and emotionally to your work. And that energy doesn't make itself. You have to cultivate that energy. It's like growing plants. You have to cultivate that energy and continually expose it to stimuli. It's like your creative self is like this organism that you need to cultivate over and over again to keep that energy. And that energy is real genuine. Can't fake it.
So how do you're working on these complex projects, at least they seem complex to me when I'm looking at it from the outside, and you're working with all these different people, many moving parts, tons of collaboration. And I feel like it can you can just be tweaking this and changing. Like, how do you know when one of your creative projects is complete? When you're like, this is ready to go out into the world now. My baby's ready to be born. Like, how do you know when it's ready, when it's finished? Do you have a light bulb moment? Is it different every time? I'm just very curious.
I think the answer to that is nothing is ever really finished.
Like, you can always think you can do more?
Always.
Yeah.
Always. But I think that you don't want to work on something too much where it loses its appeal. You want it, because you don't just look at a project as like one thing. That has to be perfect. I look at a project as a piece in the continuum. Like, I'm already thinking ahead to what I'm going to be making when I'm 60 years old. I'm 65 years old, living in Barcelona, going hiking in the mountains and doing some rad volumetric panoramas. Who knows, right? But I'm always thinking, like, I'm designing. I'm a creative professional. It's a disease that I have, in a way that, because I have to keep on making to be happy. And if I don't make, I get really sad. That's why photography's been so good, because I can go on trips. Like, let's just say the family's going on a trip, right? And I can't be at my computer. I can't make anything. I take my camera out, right? So I'm constantly, hey guys, I'm gonna go off for a few hours and photograph downtown Sofia in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for a couple, because people know that I need to do that to be happy. Otherwise, I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm not a food guy. I'm not a drinking guy. I need to assess my surroundings and manipulate them in a creative way. That's what makes me happy.
That resonates so much.
I'm not going to sit in like a Greek restaurant and be like, this is the best food I ever have. I'm so happy. It's not how it works with me. It's like, no, I need to go photograph the food will make me happy, or like reinterpreting the food and like designing and sculpting that makes me happier,
Yeah.
And so I think you just have to cultivate. You need to understand what makes you happy, right? What really gets you excited, and then just do those things, do those things, because that, in the end of the day, like, we're so lucky that we do things that we love. We're so lucky. So many people can't say that, and that career has been carefully designed by practice and by repetition and outreach and a vibe sent out. And it's so important to really understand that. I'm not making the work for accolades or awards or recognition or this or that. I could care less, man. It's more about a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that's just a byproduct.
It's all byproduct.
The goodness of it.
It's like what makes a doctor happy. A surgeon's happy by saving somebody's life, that brings them pleasure, and they understand what makes them happy. That's why they do it. I create because it makes me happy. It makes me feel alive.
Yeah.
I think a lot of your career is luck. A creative individual, a lot of it is luck. All of the big breaks in my career were lucky. Every single one. Literally every single one.
But you were prepared to be lucky, I feel. Right?
Well,
was it just complete luck, or did you work and it was a preparation so that when that luck hit, you were ready to?
It was right place at the right time luck.
Okay.
And so it takes a lot to get to that right place,
Yeah.
but then paired with the right time with the right people. And so I'm just kind of working so hard to keep on putting things out there. I'm kind of like I'm surfing for aliens, right?
Yeah.
I'm throwing things out there. I'm creating noise. I'm creating a vibration by constantly making things, and big and small, for clients, for myself. If there's a shutdown and there's no client work, I'm making personal work. I'm not the kind of person that's going to wait for someone to hire me to make work. I'm always making work.
Yeah.
No matter what,
And what's that feeling when you make that work? What's that like when you jump into that new medium, when you're working on that new project? Is it a combination of
It's curiosity?
There you go.
Yeah, it's curiosity. Yeah, and it's always a pairing. It's like you're in a dance class, right? You're learning how to do the salsa, and all of a sudden you're dancing with one partner, and they change the partner, and you're kind of like, "Ooh, how are we going to move together?" And, and it's kind of like you feeling it out. That's how I approach mediums, and I'll discover something in a certain application, and I'll say, "Okay, I want to take that discovery and I want to apply it to this application, and then that discovery will go to this application." So it's an onward. It's like it's a snowball.
Mm-hmm.
It's a snowball of sparkles.
It's a snowball of sparkles. I love it.
And they all kind of dissipate away, and some fleet off and connect with others, and some kind of go and snowball and break off into different things. And I'm just curious. And here's the thing. When I went to Humboldt State, and it was late 1990s. Right. And so computers we were just starting to use computers. Photoshop was in its infancy, After Effects, 3.0, was the kind of like After Effects and Flash were the first things I learned. They weren't teaching that in school, right? They weren't teaching us After Effects or Photoshop. I was just in the computer lab. I was that guy. I was always in the computer lab reading my Peach Pit Press, like reading my books, my lynda.com, like all that stuff, just trying to learn as much as I can. And that feeling being in the lab and learning new stuff and realizing, oh, you can actually do this and apply this to make this, that feeling I'm always seeking to replicate. When I was 20 years old, 21 years old, that feeling, I will never forget that feeling.
Up next on the show, we invite somebody super smart to break down the zeros and ones behind all the techie tech GMUNK just shared with us. Our expert today happens to be a friend of mine, designer, artist, and global head of creators for Z by HP, Josh St. John. Welcome to the show. What's up, Josh? How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Tito?
Let's talk about fluid simulations. GMUNK mentioned it a ton.
Bradley G. Monkowitz, correct?
Bradley G. Monkowitz. Yeah. What are they? And can you break them down for us?
Speaking from Bradley's perspective, he's been really kind of interested in this kind of practical versus in-camera effects. So with fluid sims, particle sims, pyro sims, so the elements, right? He's been really, I think he wants to be a wizard or something to control these elements himself. Mm-hmm. With GPU power of the Z workstations, he's been able to push those kind of creative boundaries using a bunch of different software to just recreate what we see in nature and kind of put his own spin on it.
And what are some examples of fluid simulations? How are they being used?
They're used in everything from media and entertainment. So if you're watching the latest Hollywood blockbuster, if you're seeing scenes that are shot at sea with huge waves, or you're seeing floods happening in, kind of urban environments, obviously, they're not doing all of that stuff practically. There's a hybrid approach there, but it's used in engineering pursuits. So with 3D printing, if you're spraying or depositing microfluidics, so little drops of liquid onto, let's say, powdered nylon, simulating how the material will flow. So it's used both for just its visual and aesthetic quality, but it's also used for more engineering and scientific purposes.
And what are they doing when they're doing that? They're just seeing how it's going to look and land before they actually create the thing?
Yeah, it's really just predictive, so how can we control. So in the engineering case or in the media and entertainment case?
In the engineering case. The entertainment case, I think that makes sense, right? You visually being able to see all that type of things and and create it from nothing and have way more control. I'm just trying to understand from engineering space.
Yeah, so process control is what I would say it would kind of fall under. So how do you begin to simulate these microfluidic effects of the way the inks are going to interact with the nylon particles? With the GPU power now, we can, it's not actually, it's not all just GPU. There's a lot of CPU, single threaded stuff on the solvers as well. So there's ways to kind of very accurately simulate what's going on at these very small scales so that we can improve the way in which our printers print and the types of parts that you're able to realize.
CPU, GPU, all that technical know-how. Does that mean like I just want it to work? So what's the thing that you have to focus on to make fluid simulations possible in your machine? Is that like you need to have high graphics? You need to have a high like a fast computer? What?
Yeah, I mean, so it comes down to the softwares that you're using. So whatever software you're using is going to have a different set of underlying math. So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now in the media and entertainment space, this is all like GPU driven, and that's where you're getting these amazing effects. And then on the engineering side, it could be either CPU or GPU. And it just really depends on like the underlying mathematics that are making these simulations come to work and just work, right?
Yeah.
So you can count on it, and you can count on it to be fast.
I'm a noob. I'm getting into this for the first time. What type of software should I look into? Should people be using? Should they be starting with? Or what do you recommend?
It's really depends on what you're trying to do. So I know that Bradley, he's using a lot of Maya and this thing, Bifrost, which is a plugin for that. But there's Side Effects makes a software called Houdini that does amazing effects. And then the real-time engines like Unreal and Unity are the place where you can kind of experience all of these things in action. But yeah, again, it just really comes down to the specifics of what you're trying to do. I know Bradley is trying to make these incredible images, and he's like using almost like photography tricks. So he's using virtual lenses and putting distortions, and he's taking some of his own photography to make the environment maps that actually light these sims. And so he's doing a lot of kind of multidisciplinary tricks to realize these images. Mm-hmm. So in his case, he's mixing all kinds of interesting softwares together to realize the image that he wants to.
Are all those softwares, do they cost money? Are any of them open source, free things, easy to use stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. I think most of the softwares I just mentioned have some cost to them. Some of the game engines you can use for free, and then there's like a licensing and royalty model. But there's tons of great software out there for free to get started. Yeah. I mean, Blender is open source. Blender is a great place to get started. And then on the educational licenses, a lot of the software companies have really great educational licenses deals so that people can get in and learn how to use all of these tools.
Yeah. So if you're in school, take advantage of that .edu address and get yourself some free software.
Oh, for sure.
So he also talked about why he's learning fluid simulations in 3D. Why should listeners learn 3D?
It's just one more D. I think that one more, and then when you add time to it, you get the fourth D. When we think about when we've gone from kind of when I grew up with the graphic user interface, like kind of moved away from command lines, so like C:/back to graphic user interface. Now we're really seeing with AR and VR and these kind of mixed realities moving from kind of 2D interfaces to 3D interfaces. So there's just, I think the future of computing is really a lot more 3D environments and 3D interfaces. So having a good background in 3D just gives you a lot more control. Like for instance, the image that I'm taking right now, you see I'm lit by the windows in front of me, et cetera. If this was capturing me in 3D, I'd actually be able to change the lighting after the fact.
Yeah. Creating in 3D seems pretty intensive, and you might have a bias here, but like what type of hardware do you recommend for 3D based work?
Well, one thing I want to say is actually 3D is super intuitive because like if you want to become a 2D artist, you have to learn shading and perspective and all of these things. Whereas 3D, you're actually in a virtual world. So if you want something closer to you, you just move it closer to you. So I think in some ways 3D is more approachable. The tools traditionally have been, technical, but the way things have evolved has made them a lot more approachable. And if you're just getting started for hardware, we're just in the process of releasing the ZBook Create, which is a 15-inch laptop that's going to have a lot of power for creators. And then we have the ZBook Studio, which is more of our professional device. That's for that kind of higher end professional work. But both are similar devices in the way they look and feel. But for creators just getting started, or creators kind of in more of an engineering or technical pro field, we have choices for both.
So if you want to get started in 3D, what should your first step be?
Download a 3D program and get started. I mean, the first program I ever used was, I guess it's dating myself a little, but in 1995, I walked into my tech department. We had like a studio there, and we had 3D Studio 4.0, and it was like DOS. And, I remember drawing the box, like a box, and spinning the cube on the screen for the first time. Like that's burnt into my kind of memory forever. And I think, just get started. Like Blender is a great choice because it's free. You can download it. And then a lot of the other applications are available for trials or on discounted EDU licenses. And there's just there's a ton of ways to get involved.
Yeah, that's how I've always taken the approach, is like get started and maybe like give yourself like a project, right? Like give yourself something that will give you a deadline that you'll be able to complete, and you'll learn it that much faster. So
100%. Like during quarantine, I've been putting tutorial time on my calendar, 1 hour every day, 7 days a week, and just doing projects and softwares that I've wanted to learn about, or just hadn't had the time. And that discipline has actually gotten me just so much more excited about all of the things I do on a daily basis by just having those projects. And, some of them, you start at the beginning, even like I've been doing it for a couple of decades, but, starting in a new software, you're drawing fish bowls, or you're doing something really simple, but it's fun to learn those new skills.
Totally. Josh, you're one smart man. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you get back to your laboratory, wherever you are right now.
Thanks. I'm going to go turn my left brain on.
Yeah. Left brain, right brain. Do your thing. All right.
Thanks.
I'll see you later. Big thanks to GMUNK today for coming on the show to remind us that collaboration puts the C in creativity. Make sure to follow him on all the socials at GMUNK to keep up with his latest experiments, creation, and installations, and also visit his website at gmunk.com. GMUNK.com. Rightbrainers is brought to you by Z by HP, the makers of high-performance laptops, desktops, and solutions for technical and creative pros. Well, that's a wrap on this episode. Thanks so much for joining us. If you want more food for your right brain, visit www.hp.com/rightbrainers. Until next time, I'm Tito Hamze, and this is Rightbrainers.